All right, well, welcome back to Talking Trash with Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson not here today. Sitting in for him, well, is me, Nick Deaver. Great to be with you today. When we talk Vegas, World Series of Poker, the Rio, you always think of Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, old Blue Eyes. Well, old Blue Eyes not with us anymore. So, well, with us right now, the chairman of the board of the PPA.
Old Brown Eyes.
Old Brown Eyes, former Senator Alfonse D'Amato. Senator, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a great privilege to have you here. As you are, for those people that don't know, the Senator is the mouthpiece of our lobbying group, the PPA, and you are our great savior out there in Washington.
Well, listen, I'm proud to lead the Poker Players Alliance, and as you know, we've grown from 100,000 to over 600,000. I think that great growth has taken place because the little guy at home, people, the average citizen, is angry that he or she is now precluded from being able to play poker in their own home over the internet. We're made second-class citizens. People can bet on sporting events, there's fantasy sports, they can bet on lotteries, they can bet on horses. But we now say no, it's wrong to be able to play poker at home. It's silly, it's hypocritical. And I think Congress should take a look and say, is that our business? We want to go into someone's home and tell you what you can and can't do?
Well, there are two issues here. So let's go back to the way this bill, we're talking about the UIEGA or the UIGEA, was passed, tacked on the back of the port security bill. It was signed, from what I am told, fairly begrudgingly by the president, who was not overly thrilled with this piece of legislation attached to it, but it was signed nevertheless. How is it that a bill that had trouble getting through Congress in prior years was just tacked on at the last minute and sailed through on the back of this
you had
bill?
a few people who thought they'd become president. I think you had the former Senate Majority Leader Bill Frisch, who thought that this would help him with conservatives because he was fighting against gambling and the bad things that are connected with it. And you had some very influential and well-intentioned people as well who were concerned with underage gambling. But what they did is they created a terrible situation, because just like prohibition didn't work, they wanted to stop people who were overindulging. The same thing is going to take place here in poker. You're going to have offshore operations, not regulated, and you're not now controlling youngsters where you could. You have programs today and technology where you can keep underage gamblers off the net. So it's going to cost our country lots of money, and we're in violation of the World Trade Organization.
Well, this is the other issue, and amongst all the chest thumping and people upset with the whole concept behind this bill, there are some legal hurdles that seem to have been totally ignored in the passing of this bill. One of those hurdles, of course, are our obligations under the WTO, which seems to be an organization that when we as a nation want something from it, we're prepared to run it up the flagpole as one of the great organizations of globalization, and when we don't like something about it, we're going to pretend that it doesn't exist.
Well, this is a classic case of why we are becoming viewed as the ugly American. We cry out when people steal, and rightfully so, our intellectual property rights, whether it's the great Microsoft or the other chip companies, etc., who have their products pirated, whether it's Warner Brothers or the other communications people. Rightfully, they should be indignant. Now, we're saying, well, we don't like the fact that we would have to permit use of the internet for gaming, for poker in particular. So we're not going to listen to that law. Well, the fact is that we will probably be facing in the not too distant future penalties as high as $80 billion, meaning that $80 billion worth of products, all right, we will now be suffering the consequence of people being able to trade on those with no protections for these companies, for Microsoft, for Disney, for Warner, etc. That's because of the arrogance of this administration. So, number one, that bill never should have been signed. It never should have been permitted to be tacked onto the Port Security Act, so important. And that's why members reluctantly went along, because the port, to guarantee the safety of our ports, they weren't willing to vote against the bill because it banned internet gaming. hypocritical, wrong, an invasion of people's liberties. And so I'm proud to lead this organization because it is a fight for the little guy. It is a fight for their rights. And again, why should somebody be permitted to bet on horse racing, but no, you cannot bet if you want to play poker?
Right, and you can, of course, there are exemptions for fantasy sports, which the NFL lobby was behind that.
You got it.
The horse racing exemptions, because the racetracks were behind that. Ultimately, it seems that every special interest group had their hand in this pot, and were looking at poker and pointing at poker and online gambling as the bad boy. How much of this is poker being swept up in the overall push against online gaming? And is there a possibility, do you think, that going forward, poker can be carved out as an exemption?
I think there will be a carve-out, at least for poker. I really believe that. I think Congressman Frank, in his broader bill, does the right thing. But I also commend Congressman Wexler, who says, all right, look, maybe there are some others, and we think we can distinguish poker as a game of skill, and we think we can build in protections that will keep underage kids from being permitted to play. By the way, I traveled to the Isle of Man, and their minister of finance said, you guys are losing out on an opportunity to raise revenue, to tax this, to have the people who apply for the licenses pay for the policing of the industry. He happens to be right. Now you have no policing of the industry. Those who are operating will be operating outside of the law. They're not going to be nearly as careful. They're not going to see to it that, or can they guarantee an honest game. So what we've done, even well-intentioned, I think, is opened the area up to maybe some unscrupulous operators, and number two, more importantly, deprive people of their right to participate in the game that they like. If they can't travel to a casino, why should they be precluded? It's okay for them to go to a casino, but not in the privacy of their own home?
Absolutely. Well, we've got to go to break here in just a minute. Hopefully you'll stay with us over the break. Certainly a lot more questions for you about what we can do as poker players, as fans of the game, what we can do to change this, what the PPA is doing to change this, and most importantly, what the long-term view in Washington is about these issues. And hopefully we can adjust the legislative climate to give us a good solution going forward for the long term and not just a short-term fix. We're going to go to break right now here on Talking Trash. We'll be right back with Senator Alfonse D'Amato. I'm Nick Geber. Stay with us. Loads more after these messages. It's 100,000 members. I'm very pleased that I'm one of them. But how many members do we need to get before we reach enough mass to really open some eyes in Washington, or are we there already?
Well, we're approaching it. I think you need 1 million. I think 1 million gives you the kind of, let's say you have basically 500 representatives, senators, and congressmen. You have more, 535. Use the number 500. So that means you would have about 2,000 plus in each congressional district, an average. Some a little more, some a... Those 2,000 people raising their voices, calling their congressmen, telling them, look, we want to have the right to be able to have gaming on the internet. That becomes, I think, a critical mass. Obviously, we can get the number up higher. It's all the much better. So each individual can make a difference, and they can make that by picking up the phone, by calling their congressman, by telling them I'm a registered voter, number one. And number two, I want to know if you'll support the legalization of my being able to use the internet to play poker. And if not, why? Why would you discriminate because I don't want to play the horses, but you won't permit me as an individual to play poker? It's pretty tough for a congressman to answer. He can say, well, I'm concerned about youngsters. And you can say, well, isn't that true when it comes to horse racing? Can't you have youngsters who are using the internet to play? And we understand that there are technologies available that will absolutely eliminate youngsters and require the kinds of proof from being able to play underage games. And
in fact, that's a great point. I mean, my 13-year-old has now switched from playing online poker to playing the horses online and is doing quite well.
How do they do on the horse? I think the horses are a terrible thing. But having said that, everybody makes his or her choice. I don't get an enjoyment out of that, but I do enjoy playing poker. And I used to like to play it over the internet.